falls!
It wasn't just Vikings in the mist. It was a legend, arguing with itself. A film carved from frost and fire, then stitched back together after a ruthless tug of war. What looked like myth felt real, and what felt real kept shifting in the fog. Behind each torchlit charge were edits, reshoots, and colliding visions. The story you remember. It survived a storm you never saw. Tonight, we're unearthing the strange, the buried, and the improbable. Here are 20 weird facts about the 13th Warrior and the behind-the-scenes battles that forged them. Step into the smoke and hear what the steel won't say.
You could have killed him at will.
Yes?
Fact 1. 2 visions, 1 battlefield. Behind the camera, John McTiernan chased a grounded survival tale. Quiet, grim, tactile. After bruising test screenings, author-producer Michael Crichton stepped in, commissioning reshoots, a new cut, and a pivot toward punchier pulp. 2 edits wrestled for control. The theatrical version plays like their uneasy truce. McTiernan's pass prized silence, mud, and dread, letting mystery do the work. Crichton's pass favored momentum, exposition, and rousing crescendos. Even the score and a pivotal villain reshape grew from that power struggle, shifting tone scene by scene. Reports and Joe Blow retrospectives still frame it as a rare case where 2 visions cancelled each other's strengths. The result, a film that feels lived in, yet larger than life. Part survival chronicle, part adventure yarn. And once the music changed, the mood changed with it. Fact 2, the score you never heard. Graham Revell wrote an entire score, low, percussive, built on droning voices and iron rhythms. It matched McTiernan's mud and fog realism, less melody, more menace. Then the studio pivoted. Revell's music was archived, and Jerry Goldsmith constructed a new backbone almost from scratch. Themes you can hum, brass that carries the warriors, strings that lift Ahmad, drums that turn fog into marching feet. Cues were moved, scenes rebalanced, and silence filled with propulsion. That swap didn't just sweeten moments, it reframed character, sudden nobility where there was once dread, uplift where there had been unease. Collectors still chase Revell's buried cues, trading fragments and memories. Different music, different movie, and when the horns finally arrive, the film stands up straighter. You can hear the edit breathe again. Fact 3. A hidden recast in the shadows. The Wendell mother isn't who the credits suggest. Early on, veteran actor Susan Willis played the ancient matriarch, gaunt, ceremonial, almost statue still. Then the reshoots arrived. The creative pivot demanded a more physically imposing presence, and Kristen Cloak stepped into the furs, blades, and flicker-lit cave. The switch happened deep in post, so Willis's name remained, while Cloak went uncredited, an eerie echo of the film's 2 competing identities. Watch closely, and you can feel the change in intent. The mother transforms from deathly oracle to feral antagonist, shifting the final confrontation from sacrilege to survival. It's a perfect microcosm of the production's tug of war. Same legend, different face. A character rewritten by test cards, tone notes, and the cold math of what plays in a packed theater. Fact 4. The cost of fog and fire. Studios greenlit a bold adventure at roughly $85 million. Then the fog rolled in. Reshoots, delays, and dueling edits pushed costs into the rumor range of $160 million once marketing was baked in. Sets were rebuilt, battles restaged, and entire sequences recut to chase a clearer, punchier tone. By the time the film finally opened in late August 1999, the summer belonged to other juggernauts. The 13th Warrior limped to about $61.7 million worldwide, a mismatch that branded it a legendary money pit. Yet the waste wasn't purposeless. What's on screen is heavy with craft, full-scale boats, torchlit villages, armor for a dozen heroes, and that saturated, freezing atmosphere. It's the paradox of this production. The movie looks expensive because it is, and the bill never thawed. Fact 5. Myth filmed in real cold. Those breath clouds aren't CGI. British Columbia's damp cold did the work. The crew hauled cameras through mud, sleet, and ankle-deep riverbeds to sell a world that bites back. DP Peter Menzies Jr. leaned into iron blues by day and ember black nights, letting torchlight paint faces and armor like living metal. Rain machines, mostly unnecessary necessary. The weather cooperated a little too well, soaking fur, warping shields, and turning every charge into a slip and scramble. Production design met nature halfway. Real timber halls, real smoke, practical boats cutting grey water. That tactile grit makes swords feel heavier, footsteps louder, and fear closer. You don't watch this landscape, you endure it with them. And in that endurance, something magical happened next. A quiet scene that speaks louder than battle. Fact 6. The campfire spell. Ahmad's campfire breakthrough is the movie's quiet thunder. He sits apart, while the Norsemen joke, argue, and sling barbs he can't decode. Night after night, the camera returns to that circle of flame. Consonants soften, rhythms emerge, and then mid-conversation, their speech lands in English, because to Ahmad, it finally makes sense. Not magic, cinema that turns listening into action. The cut converts patience into power, proving knowledge can be as lethal as steel. From that moment, he stops being cargo and starts being company, trading quips, reading danger, shaping plans. It's elegant, fast, unforgettable. You feel understanding lock into place, like a blade in its scabbard, and it foreshadows everything that follows. Strategy over spectacle, observation over panic. The scholar becomes a fighter by hearing first, then acting. Fact 7. The real writer of the North. Ahmad ibn Fadlan wasn't a screenwriter's invention. He was a 10th century diplomat from Baghdad, whose real journey north reads like a field report from the edge of the map. In 921-922, he traveled to the Volga Bulgars and left a razor-sharp account. The Risala, boats carved like beasts, trade rituals, fierce hospitality, shocking hygiene by his standards, and the famous funeral of a Rus chieftain. Michael Crichton took that eyewitness lens and braided it with Beowulf, swapping literal monsters for a human threat seen through an outsider's eyes. That's why the film feels half chronicle, half nightmare. Ahmad isn't comic relief. He's the recorder who turns chaos into story, and the conscience that measures bravery without losing curiosity. But the monsters he meets aren't mythical at all. Fact 8. The Wendell weren't magic. They move like a superstition, but the Wendell are built from anthropology, not sorcery. Skulls worn as masks, claws carved from bone, pelts that turn men into silhouettes of bears. Michael Crichton leaned on whispers of prehistoric bear cult rites and the idea of a tribe clinging to old gods as the world changes around them. McTiernan shoots them as fragments, fur in torchlight, teeth in a scream. So your brain finishes the monster the costumes only suggest. It's a nasty trick. Make the threat human and it feels closer. Tunnels, smoke, ritual drums, every detail says cult, not creature. That choice flips the story's moral mirror. Vikings fight for people, the Wendell fight for extinction. No spells, just belief sharpened into violence. And their caves hide the next reveal. Fact 9. Patchwork warriors. Look closely. No two Vikings wear the same story. One carries dented Roman-style plates, another a strip of Eastern chain. A third fights in stitched fur and scavenged mail. It isn't random, it's biography. Every trophy strapped to a shoulder, every odd buckle hints at trade routes, mercenary work, and raids that stretched from the North Sea to Byzantium. The gear looks borrowed because it is, collected across seasons and seas, then hammered into something personal. That lived-in mix does more than sell realism. It explains these men without a line of exposition. You read status in steel, grief in a chipped helm, pride in a foreign blade. The warband becomes a moving museum of survival. And when the light hits, history glints back right before the next charge. Fact 10. Why 13? 13 isn't a random head count. It's a frame for legend. In saga logic, 12 warriors form the ring. The outsider makes it meaningful. Beowulf echoes hum under the names, but the math matters. A dozen sworn blades and one witness who turns deeds into story. Ahmad steps into that empty space, not as a mascot, but as the perspective that binds the company. He translates more than language. He translates culture, fear, and fate, so the audience can follow without losing the strangeness. 12 fight for home. The 13th records why it matters. The number becomes a ritual of balance. Order plus disruption. Tribe plus stranger. Steel plus ink. That's why the title sticks in memory. And that balance sets up the next shift, from numbers to faith. Fact 11. Faith as armor. Amid roaring toasts to Odin and the drumbeat of destiny, Ahmad keeps a quieter rhythm. He washes when others scoff, whispers a verse when others sharpen steel, and pauses to align himself before chaos. That ritual is more than habit. It's a shield you can't see. The film keeps cutting back to these small acts: hands, water, breath, truth, so you feel conviction harden where armor ends. It reframes courage, not the loudest roar, but the steadiness to act without surrendering who you are. The Norseman learned to read his calm like a standard. When he kneels, fear steadies, and when he rises, plans follow. Faith doesn't cancel the fight, it clarifies it. And that clear line, drawn in mist and prayer, sets up the next clash with opinion. Fact 12. Critics drew swords. Opening weekend brought more scowls than cheers. Some critics called it muddled. Two movies wrestling in one frame. Roger Ebert's low star count stung, and trade outlets tagged it handsome but hollow, praising craft while doubting its soul. Yet even then, a few voices clocked the appeal. Tactile combat, the language scene, Banderas's steady anchor. Over time, that minority grew louder. DVD, late-night cable, and HD restorations let the atmosphere breathe. What once read as confusion began to feel like texture. The verdict quietly flipped from misfire to cult object, a film you recommend with a grin and a caveat. Love it or not, the conversation never died, because the mood lingers after the credits. And that persistence sets up the next chapter. Timing, not just taste. Fact 13. A whisper in a loud summer. Timing did the film no favors. Dropping in late August 1999 meant walking into a theater already roaring with word-of-mouth monsters. Sleeper hits and cultural earthquakes owned the marquee. Against that noise, The 13th Warrior arrived like a campfire story told outside the tent. Moody, deliberate, easy to miss if you weren't listening. Marketing leaned epic, while the movie breathed atmosphere, so expectations and delivery never quite matched. Weekend buzz went elsewhere, leaving this one to gather dust before audiences discovered it at home. That mismatch, calendar, campaign, and cadence helped stamp the flop label that stuck for years. But the quieter the summer faded, the louder its fog felt on rewatch. And when people finally leaned in, they started asking a dangerous question. Was there another cut? Fact 14. The cut we never got. Whispers say McTiernan's version ran a touch longer, breathed slower, and leaned harder into dread. More politics at the mead table, a softer thread between Ahmad and a noblewoman, and a finale lit by unease instead of triumph. Then reshoots redrew the map. Dialogue replaced silences. Momentum trumped mood, and certain beats, goodbyes, glances, lingering prayers, allegedly vanished into the vault. Fans still combed trailers and production stills for clues, stitching a phantom cut from frames that don't appear in the final. Officially, nothing has surfaced. Unofficially, the myth keeps growing, because it explains the friction you feel in the movie's bones. Maybe that alternate cut would fix everything. Maybe it would break something else. Either way, the rumor keeps the campfire burning for one more story. Fact 15. Tools of the dream. Steel, smoke, and wood weren't just props. They were the plan. Shot on Panavision with Peter Menzies Jr. behind the camera, the movie leans on wide glass for landscapes and tighter lenses for faces crowded by fur and breath. Wolf Kroger's production design builds real timber halls, creaking platforms, and longboats that bite gray water so footsteps answer with mud instead of echoey sets. Torches do most of the lighting. Flame paints armor and eyes, while the night swallows everything else. The camera mixes muscular handheld with deliberate locked frames, letting chaos feel human and rituals feel carved in stone. Sound follows suit. Leather, iron, wet rope, wind. Nothing glossy, nothing weightless. It's a toolbox for tactile myth-making, and it primes the next beat. Manners before metal. Fact 16. Manners before metal. Before blades flash. Etiquette clashes, shared bowls, one washwater basin, meat torn by hand, customs that jolt Ahmad as much as any sword. He flinches, observes, adjusts. A glance becomes a lesson. Who eats first? Who cracks the joke? Who quiets the table with a look? Respect is negotiated through posture, long before it's proven in battle. The film lingers on touch, water over fingers, bread passed palm to palm, so you feel cultures grinding like shields. Then the mirroring begins. He keeps his prayers. They keep their boasts. Both borrow a little from the other. By the time the riders appear in the fog, suspicion has thinned into shared rules. That social armistice matters. When Steele finally sings, they're not strangers at a table. They're a unit. Fact 17. Dirt and myth DNA. Before gritty fantasy became the default, this film planted the flag. Mud under nails. Ritual over exposition. Courage that smells like smoke. It treats legend like archaeology. You dig through ash and bone to find meaning. So the supernatural feels half-heard, and the human cost lands first. That sensibility echoes echoes later across prestige sagas. Outsider eyes guiding us in. Violence that's weighty instead of flashy. Politics whispered by firelight. You can trace the lineage in weather-beaten worlds where steel clanks, prayer mutters, and victory tastes like rainwater. The focus isn't on chosen one destiny, it's on men and women carrying belief through bad weather. That's why the film lingers. It turned myth tactile, and once you feel it in your hands, you start noticing relics everywhere, even in theme parks. Fact 18. The Epcot ship story. After the dust settled, one legend drifted south. A full-scale Viking longship from the production allegedly found new life at Epcot's Norway Pavilion. For years, guests climbed a dragon-proud playground boat and snapped photos under Florida sun. A surreal afterlife for a film forged in fog. Whether that hull was truly screen-used or simply a studio twin remains debated in fan circles. The timeline and provenance blur like the movie's own mist. Disney later removed the play area and landscaped the spot, but the rumor refuses to sink. It fits the film's paradox perfectly. Artifacts of a costly war repurposed for everyday delight. From battle scene to family snapshot, the ship's journey reads like a wink. Cinema's relic turned into vacation memory. Fact 19. Firelight over exposition. The movie trusts flame more than speeches. Torches carve faces out of black. Smoke threads through frames, and fog behaves like a living extra. Instead of dumping lore, it lets texture teach you. Wet wood thuds, mail scratches, horses exhale steam, and blades ring dull when tired hands miss. You learn who leads by who stands nearest the light, who doubts by who hangs back in shadow. Night scenes don't hide cheapness, they reveal priority. Mood first, footnotes later. Even silence is designed. Wind in gaps, embers ticking, prayer under breath. It's storytelling by sensation, making you feel the village before you know it. When the sun finally burns through, it's a relief you've earned. And that sensory conviction sets up the last twist, defeat that endured. Fact 20. A flop that wouldn't die. Box office said failure. Time said not so fast. The 13th Warrior left theaters bruised, then started winning the long game. On DVD shelves, late-night cable, HD streams, and word of mouth from people who felt the cold and couldn't shake it. What critics once called muddled began to read as texture. What looked small started to feel deliberate. Filmmakers name-check its tactile grit. Fans trade stories of the other cut, and new viewers show up for Banderas and stay for atmosphere. That's the trick of durable myths. They outlive verdicts. The movie didn't conquer opening weekend. It colonized memory inch by inch, fog bank by fog bank. If defeat wrote the first line, endurance wrote the rest. And somewhere in that endurance, the legend finishes forging itself. It wasn't built to please, it was built to persist. Two visions collided. A fortune vanished, and fog kept rolling. What survived is a tactile myth. Mud, fire, prayer, told by an outsider who turns steel into story. Maybe the lost cut exists. Maybe it's just the echo we need to explain the friction we feel. Either way, this film proves legend doesn't require consensus, only conviction. If memory is the box office, the 13th Warrior won long after the receipts were tallied. Step out of the smoke and ask yourself, which version do you carry, and why does it still breathe?